This is Steve Curtis. I'm the Customer Experience Lead for Columbus Global. With me today is Stephen Fox and Craig Hamer. And what we're going to cover today is the benefits of cloud versus on-premise for Dynamics 365. Let's set a bit of the backdrop of the Microsoft Cloud. Over 80% of the Fortune 500 are on the Microsoft Cloud, and 50% of those are using Windows Azure. Microsoft spent over $15 billion to build the Microsoft Cloud infrastructure, and this runs across more than 100 data centers and over 1 million servers. When I was working for Microsoft a year ago, I heard that 3 years ago Microsoft had bought about 17% of all of the world's servers that were sold in that year, and that was part of them building up the cloud infrastructure that you can use today. 700 trillion transactions are done a day over this network, 1.5 million requests every second, and 14 billion Azure AD authentications happen every week for over 500 million users. So, some of the statistics are absolutely staggering. So it's a very, very mature, large, guaranteed uptime cloud service. If you look at the use for Dynamics 365, there's over 100 data centers over the world. It's one of the largest three networks in the world, and if you look specifically at Europe and more specifically at the UK, there are 2 data centers in the UK West and UK South, and obviously one of them backs up to the other. So any Dynamics 365 customer effectively has 5 environments. They have their main production environment, but the backups then, the hot backups to the backup DC and the backups in the main DC mean that you really have full comfort over the way that DC will continue to operate and your system will be available for you. If you look at it from a cost savings perspective, it really is very, very attractive from a cost perspective. The upfront license for the SaaS version, the full SaaS version, will be more than the license for on-premise. But what you have to think about is that is a full service license. It gives you the service running on all the infrastructure. So it gives you the hardware, the software, the necessary networking infrastructure, the energy, the housing, the buildings to be able to house all of that hardware and software. And then it gives you a full DR capability, again, including hardware and software and networking requirements. And then it gives you all the proactive monitoring, the resources that come into making sure this is a 99.9% operation, and it's available for you really all year round. And if you try and add up all of those costs locally to be able to provision that, I guarantee you that an on-premise license and capability will be more than this Dynamics 365 cloud capability. So if you look at the 3 ways in which the software can be deployed, you do have 3 main options. One is that you go for the full cloud service. You use the Dynamics 365 service offering in the cloud. With that, you have single sign-on across all your commercial cloud services, and you're basically using your Office 365 portal in terms of security, using the same AD authentication to get into your Dynamics 365 environment. The second option is that you buy on-premise licenses from Microsoft, and then you do the deployment of those on-premise licenses onto Azure infrastructure as a service. And that means the benefit of that is that you can manage your updates. With a service update, Microsoft manages these service updates for you. But if you want to have a little bit more control over the timing of your updates, and maybe want to stay on a platform that isn't updated regularly, then you can consider that cloud and edge option. And then the one on the far right you can buy the on-premise license and deploy that on your own servers. And again, you need to think about your server licenses for the software, and you need to be able to manage that completely yourselves. That option is still available, though. We do have customers that still run on-premise. A lot of scenarios where we see this, we see it sometimes in banking, although the banking ombudsman and the moderators are now moving more firmly to be able to support cloud. Metro Bank is a good example of that. Runs all of their Dynamics infrastructure on cloud, and that Microsoft themselves helped with getting approval through the moderators to be able to do that. The second scenario where we see customers running fully on-premise is where the end customer, the clients themselves, insist that that data is held on-premise. So an example of customers that do this are the Department of the Defense in US and the MOD in the UK, where that customer data cannot be held on Azure and on cloud. So if we then look at the reason behind and the history behind the movement to cloud, I remember 3 or 4 years ago that there was a scenario from Microsoft where people who were running the on-premise version of Dynamics sometimes would get updates before the on-cloud version, or at exactly the same time. Now what's happening is that cloud is definitely ahead of on-premise, and that means that the functionality, the up-to-date functionality, sometimes is only available on the cloud version, and it sometimes takes 6 to 12 months for on-premise customers to be able to get to that, to get to those updates. Microsoft are very definitely investing heavily in the cloud, and advising most of their customers to move to cloud if they have the capability to do that. And Columbus Global is definitely following that, and we've seen that most of our business customers are now implementing on cloud. Associated with that, though, Satya had to put the infrastructure in place and the support in place to make sure that he has your trust. Microsoft collaborates with both industry and the regulators to build trust into that cloud ecosystem. And it goes across 4 main principles: security, privacy and control, compliance, and transparency. To protect the integrity and availability of data, to control who can see that data and who can get access to it, to manage the storage, to comply with the local regulations and the local laws, ISO standards for the UK and Europe, and then the US has different sets of standards, and then again Asia Pacific has different sets of standards. So it's a very, very wide-ranging set of standards that the Dynamics 365 cloud infrastructure supports. And then finally, the transparency, to give full visibility into who has access to your data when it's stored on cloud. And all of this is visible and available to you through the Microsoft Trust Center. So going down into further detail on these 4 principles, at the security level, safeguarding the data using state-of-the-art industry security technologies and processes, using the 365 identity platform that's very mature, so users use the same username and password, and then isolating the data itself and the infrastructure from other tenants, other customers. So even though it's a cloud infrastructure and some of the stuff is shared, the data itself and the infrastructure is not shared. And so if you look at this across the second one, privacy and control, the goal of that is for you to be able to, you own your data and you know where that's located and you have full control over that. And at an implementation level, you have choice about which data center you deploy that onto. You have full control over the storage and the movement of that data. And all the data that's in transit through to the DC and back again is fully encrypted. Third one, in terms of compliance, standard SOPs to meet these certification requirements, and they are regularly checked. And again, control, audit, access to the production environments. And there are both internal and external audits that are done on the Microsoft data centers. And in addition to this, going across this, the Microsoft regularly has ethical hacking companies that try to hack into Microsoft data centers to ensure that from a security perspective and compliance perspective, everything is completely secure. Finally, from a transparency perspective, your goals, you need to know how Microsoft secures the data, where it's stored, who can access it, and what the rules are around that, and how Microsoft will respond to government requests for data. And you can be absolutely confident that with Microsoft and with Dynamics 365, that customer data is never used for advertising. Nobody's given direct or unfettered access to customer data unless you, as a customer, direct in that way. And you have full access to the data even if you stop the service. And again, all of those different areas are covered in the Microsoft Trust Center online that we can give you access to. So the summary of the benefits of the Microsoft Cloud and D365 on the Microsoft Cloud. It's a very mature, scalable cloud now, one of the top 3 in the world. So from a service, reliability, performance, elasticity perspective, you can be absolutely guaranteed that you'll get good performance from an on-cloud infrastructure. It does give you an overall cost reduction versus an on-premise model. And it's a service approach, and this means that you will always be on the most up-to-date release, and therefore you can take advantage of all of the functionality as soon as it comes online. You don't need any on-premise servers. You don't have to wait for IT. And to finish off, if you look at the cloud infrastructure, it's fully secure, it's standards compliant, and it's transparent in terms of use of data. This is Steve Curtis. Please feel absolutely free to contact me or any of my colleagues using the email addresses that we've attached to this presentation.